Any way the president looks, he can see legal threats closing in around him. There's the Russia connection. Long a favourite of the president's liberal foes is the idea that he knowingly colluded with the Russians, joining forces against Hillary Clinton.
There was no collusion at all. I didn't know the president. There was nobody to collude with.
Just this week, the president changed course over a key 2016 meeting between his son and a Russian lawyer. Having previously said it was about adoption policy, on Sunday he admitted it was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal and done all the time in politics, but that he hadn't known about it. And indeed that hints at the difficulties former FBI Director Robert Mueller will have at proving direct collusion. Mr. Trump can always blame associates, even his own son, for things he had no knowledge of.
There's a lot of stuff being thrown around. Collusion versus conspiracy.
Watching President Trump this week, he sure seemed like a man who is worried about both.
In terms of jeopardy, conflicts of interest may prove to be a bigger threat. The president faces challenges under the so-called emoluments laws, statutes designed to prevent incumbents milking their position for commercial gain. In late July, the president tried and failed to stop a case proceeding in Washington, D.C. that accuses him of giving his Trump hotel an unfair advantage over its competitors. Critics claim that foreign delegations have been encouraged to stay at Trump's hotel, boosting its profits. Legally, an emoluments case is more precisely defined than one of collusion with a foreign power. Then add hush money to the list. You may have heard about Stormy Daniels.
I'm sorry, I'm done. I'm done being bullied.
But there are others, such as former Playboy model Karen McDougal. A couple of weeks ago, it emerged that Michael Cohen, his then lawyer, taped a conversation with Trump about buying her silence. The president and his friends hurled brickbats at his former lawyer.
No, I expected something like this from Cohen. He's been lying all week. I mean, he's been lying for years.
The potential legal issue here is that hush money may have violated campaign finance rules. Meanwhile, the trial of Paul Manafort continues to produce revelations about his tax and financial affairs. That's not a big worry for the White House, though reputationally it's not great, but there will be a follow-on trial on charges of acting as an unregistered foreign agent, in this case the former government of Ukraine. Which brings us back to where we started. The Mueller inquiry and claims of collusion continue to fascinate the Washington elite. So, what are the chances President Trump will be impeached? We're joined now from New York by two guests. Elizabeth Holtzman, a former member of the House Judiciary Committee that recommended impeachment against President Nixon during the Watergate scandal, and a former advisor to Donald Trump during the presidential campaign in 2016, Sam Nunberg. He was subpoenaed to give evidence to the Mueller inquiry. Thank you both very much for joining us. Sam Nunberg, if I can start with you. I mean, We've heard about various areas of legal jeopardy here for the president, but in the end, how crucial are actually the politics of the midterms to his political survival?
Well, that's a very prescient question. In fact, we have a special election tonight in Ohio, which can give an indication about how the House is going to go for the midterm election. This midterm election is ahistoric, so your audience can understand it is essentially Donald Trump's first re-elect. Why? Because if the Democrats take control of the House, I can assure you that Jerry Nadler, who would be the chair, and Adam Schiff, who would be the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, will take a very liberal interpretation of this conspiracy collusion, what I consider nonsense, and any violation or any idea that this president has obstructed justice, which is also nonsensical, and they will use it to get articles of impeachment through the Congress. Now, some would say, well, that happened to Bill Clinton. It is much different for it to happen to a first-term president in the second half of his first term heading into re-election who would also be crippled on the world stage, essentially.
Elizabeth Holtzman, can I ask you, if that scenario materialises, and the Democrats gain control of the House. I'm not sure how many people would bet on that right now, but let's say it happens. What would the process be from then on in terms of impeachment?
Well, the only impeachment that worked in the history of the United States is the one against Richard Nixon. And he would have been impeached and convicted by the Senate if he didn't resign first. The reason it was successful was that it took a substantial amount of evidence, some evidence from the special prosecutor, some evidence from the Senate Watergate Committee, and put that together in a bipartisan and extremely fair fashion. The articles of impeachment were voted on a bipartisan basis, and that process has withstood the test of time. Now, what would happen now? In my opinion, right now, there theoretically are grounds for impeachment of Donald Trump on the grounds of obstruction of justice. I know the other guest says it's nonsense, but trust me, there are serious issues with regard to that. I don't think Congress is going to move immediately, just the way the House of Representatives didn't move immediately to impeach. The House of Representatives started with an impeachment inquiry. It assembled facts and it looked at the law, and the Constitution, and that's what should happen here. The problem is that the Republican Congress has not tried to get all the information, has pulled back, pulled punches, and has refused to look at certain things and refused to hold public hearings. So I think the first thing that the Congress will do, if the Democrats take control, will be to try to get the facts, and then
Sam Nundorf, sorry, if I can just pass the baton back to Sam Nundorf, Nunberg, sorry. In terms of proving collusion, he presumably can throw people under the bus. He can just say they were having these meetings, I didn't know what was going on, including even his son if he has to.
Well, it's very interesting that you just talked about that Trump Tower meeting with the Russian attorney Natalia. If you look at that, what happened there was Don Jr., and he released the set of emails. He accepted a meeting from a business associate, the Agalarov family. And what the meeting said was that Agalarov, a Russian oligarch, had met with the Crown prosecutor, and there was sealed information, presumably an indictment against Hillary Clinton. Now, we don't remember in the conscience of this election, Hillary Clinton's corruption was a major issue, and she could have had a corruption charge in Russia because her husband had received a $500,000 speaking fee, and the Clinton Foundation received over $3 million or so from the Russia Uranium One company. And what happened was that this Natalia, who incidentally was denied immigration parole previously, was allowed in by the Obama State Department. She comes up to the Trump meeting, and Goldstone, who helped organize it, who worked for Eamon, has even testified. It was released in the House Intelligence Report that he apologized for the bait and switch. What was the bait and switch? She comes in and lobbies against the Magnitsky Act. So this is very important when we go to collusion or we go to some kind of conspiracy with the Russians.
Okay.
Donald Trump, as president, sir, let me just say this, as President Donald Trump, facts are hard things to dispute. He has been much tougher on Putin than any of his predecessors. Now, people will find that laughable. I'm talking about two separate sets of sanctions. I'm talking about rearming NATO. I'm talking about selling the missile shield to Poland. And I'm talking about arming the Ukrainians.
Let's go back to Elizabeth Holtzman for just a moment there, because if Sam Nunberg is right, and actually...
He's not. Let's just get that clear.
Yeah, but hang on.
Right.
I know that you have some doubts yourself about the evidence on collusion. What are the other areas of legal jeopardy?
Listen, we don't have the whole story on collusion, and collusion isn't really the right word here.
But in terms of proof,
is the right word, and conspiracy is a crime. One of the things that the Trump people have been trying to do is say, well, so what if he colluded? Because collusion isn't a crime. Collusion is another way of saying conspiracy.
But if you were giving him legal advice, sorry to interrupt, if you were giving him legal advice, would you be more worried about that, or the emoluments case, or the potential campaign finance violations? What would you see as the looming threat to him?
Well, one that you left out was in the suit by the New York State Attorney General, which accused his foundation of improprieties and referred the matter to various agencies for possible criminal action. The New York State Attorney General is going to be trying to get Donald Trump's tax return. So he sees problems everywhere he looks. His son is in legal jeopardy, potential legal jeopardy, because you have a question as to whether he told the truth to the U.S. Senate and the Senate committee.
Let me just pass that back to Sam Nunberg. Just on the same question, as we've got to wrap this up, I'm very sorry, time is short. But if you were giving him a legal advice, what do you think is the biggest threat to him of these various threats we've discussed?
Once again, the biggest threat is the Democrats winning the House and trying to nullify the election results and try to take out this president on these trumped-up charges. If you want to say that the president conspired with the Russians, aided and abetted the Russians to interfere in our election, then I would say the Obama administration did, precisely when National Security Advisor Suzanne Rice gave a stand-down order to Cyber Command not to do anything to the Russians. What was President Obama doing then? You know, facts, once again, are stubborn things.
Your example is
I'm sorry.
I was a former prosecutor, and you can't get away with murder by saying somebody else also murdered someone. Because Donald Trump acted badly.
If there was a conspiracy, ma'am, if there was a conspiracy, then President Obama should have done something to stop the Russians.
Not a bad place to leave it.
I'm sorry.
Elizabeth Holtzman, Sam Nunberg, thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.